For us, for all we have is an invisible God. We cannot see him. But how can we experience an invisible God? We can experience him through tangible ways, and that's what he promises. When you give tangibly, you can experience him tangibly. And that's a wonderful thing, isn't it? Because otherwise it's all just feelings. It's just there's no substance to this. I'm just going to go straight into it. This is the topic that most pastors don't want to talk about, but I got to talk about it. I'm going to talk about tithing. Okay? So God's down. Talk about tithing. The way that I've understood tithing has changed over a period of time. It's changed. It's changed so much that I have confidence to preach this. I don't think I would have had the confidence 10 years ago, but I've just got a great conviction here around tithing. It's something that I've done all my life. It started off as just purely because I was told that was the thing to do. But now it's really formed into a conviction, a way of life that I embrace. And I hope that if you're not tithing, that you would be able to join in this journey. And I hope that this message is one of the catalysts to just trigger that journey with the Lord, because I believe it's a wonderful thing the Lord has created. All right, let's go straight into it. When Jesus rocked up, he really stirred up everything that was spoken about in the Old Testament. And he spoke about the Old Testament, he spoke about the law of God in a certain way. And what he did was he uses this phrase, you have heard, and then, but I want you to think it like this. You have heard it like this, but I want you to think of it like this. Let me give you some examples. One of the things he said was, you have heard that it would say, eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. You've heard this before, right? And Jesus says, that's the way that Moses described the law. Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. If somebody hurts your eyes and makes you blind, well, the only way to do justice would be then for them to take your eye away. In some sense, what Jesus describes is, this is the lowest form of law. Because he says, but I say to you, turn the other cheek. That's what Jesus says. He takes the law and he describes it as, that is the lowest form of justice. That's the lowest form. Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. You and I don't want to live under this justice system. You don't. Because it doesn't work well for anyone. You accidentally do something, well, guess what? It's going to purposely happen to you. Does that make sense? I mean, who wants justice to happen during sports? You accidentally do a spike, whack someone in the face. It's like, okay, we need to serve justice right now. Stand there while I spike it at your face. We don't want this justice. This justice system is the most lowest form of justice. Let's talk about marriage. Jesus talks about marriage and he says this. He says, Moses, because of the hardness of your hearts, permitted you to divorce your wives. But from the beginning, it was not so. Because what the law describes is, because your heart is so hardened, I'm going to let you divorce. Because I want to give you a way to live still an honorable life without having to be out of the community forever. In other words, if by the law, if you wanted to divorce your wife and it was illegal, the only way you could live was to divorce your wife and not live inside of that community. Does that make sense? Because that's the law. If the law says you cannot divorce your wife, well, guess what? If you want to divorce, well, the only way is to live outside of the law. That means outside of the country, outside of the jurisdiction. So Moses said, divorce is okay. But Jesus says, but that's not the point of getting married. The law describes the lowest form of love. It describes the lowest form of commitment. Because no man or woman wants to get married thinking, I'm going to get married, but hey, you know what? We can get divorced, so it's fine. If I was doing premarital counseling and the couple said, Pastor, you know what, seriously, the way we think about marriage is we just want to get married, and you know what, if it doesn't work out, we'll get a divorce. I'll go, I'm not doing your wedding. I don't want any part of this. Because that is the lowest form of marriage. It's the lowest form of law. Yeah, of course you could get divorced, but that's not the point of getting married. You don't get married with that in mind. Does that make sense? The law shows the lowest form. Now here it is. And I'm just praying you have hearts to receive this. Could it be that the law also describes the lowest form of giving? If the law is all about the lowest standard for living, it's the lowest standard. The lowest standard for justice is eye for eye. The lowest standard of love is marriage and then consider divorce. Then maybe the lowest form of giving is then render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's and to God the things that are God's. That's in Luke. And so when Jesus says this, give to Caesar what's Caesar's, give to him his taxes and give to God his, and he already knows the Jewish guys all do this, give to him the tithes and offerings. Maybe what Jesus was describing was, well, just do the lowest thing that you're supposed to do. Do the most elementary thing you're supposed to do. And so what the law describes, because we know this, when we talk about tithing, often it's spoken as, but that was an Old Testament thing. We don't need to do that anymore. And that's true. But maybe what the Old Testament was describing was the lowest form of giving. One of the things that really transformed my conviction around tithing was actually not Moses, it was actually Abram. Before he was Abram. Notice this. In Genesis 14, you'll see this story. If you have a Bible, I really want you to see this in your passages. I really want you to see this. Genesis 14, 18 to 20. This is one of two moments where I'm praying. Some of you go, what? No, I never saw this before. Genesis 14, 18 to 20. If you have your Bibles, I want you to see it in there. Okay, many of you found it, so I'm going to read it. And Melchizedek, everyone say Melchizedek. Melchizedek, king of Salem, bought out bread and wine. He was who? Priest of God Most High. And he blessed him and said, "Blessed be Abraham by God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth. And blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand." And what did Abram do? And Abram gave him a tenth of everything. See, Abram, just before this, went into war. He was involved in war and then he was victorious. And so he got a great plunder. And then King of Melchizedek, king of Salomon's other kings, came to him. And as he came to him, what Melchizedek did was he brought bread and wine. Isn't this crazy? Bread and wine back in Abram? Is this not the bread and wine we just shared? This is wild. And who was Melchizedek? Priest of the Most High God. What? Where did the priest come out of in Abram's time? I thought priests were Moses' time. Where does this priest come out of? And so this priest offers bread and wine. I swear, this is crazy. In Genesis 14, bread and wine. We just did bread and wine because of Jesus Christ and the new covenant. So he almost offers what looks like communion to Abraham. And in receiving communion and receiving the blessing of that moment, this bread and wine, which of course is also staples, bread and wine, Abraham returns, he responds to Melchizedek, who is a priest, and gave him a tenth of everything. He gave a tenth of all the spoils. So the idea that the tithe is from the Old Testament is true, but the idea that the tithe originated with Moses is not true. The tithe is before law. It was before. The tithe became something in law, but the root of tithe, the origin of tithe is actually Abraham. Abraham gave a tenth. And to who? He gave it to a priest. This is wild, because when we think about tithe, where are you giving tithe to? You're giving it to the church. And so this is Abraham gave it to the priest. There's the Israelites who gave it to the Levites. And then now we talk about the church and the people of God giving it to the church. Are you seeing this? But the origin is not Moses. Let me give you one more, and you might think, oh, James, you sound like you're making this stuff up. What blew my mind was this next bit. I want you to turn to Hebrews. Isn't this funny? Notice what you'll do with your Bible. Go to Hebrews now. Where are you going? Keep going. Go to the other side of the Bible, in other words. Yeah? Isn't this funny? This is like classic. You're going from Genesis 14, now go to Hebrews 7. Hebrews 7. Go to the other side. So don't take my word for it. Let's take the writer of Hebrews, his word for this. From this Melchizedek, I mean, the fact that he's even appears in Hebrews, what? And actually, Melchizedek is also acknowledged by David in Psalm 110 as also the first high priest. Now, the first high priest, where does he... Okay, actually, I'm just going to read this. Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of the Most High God. It's almost word for word of the Old Testament. Met Abraham returning from the slaughter of the kings and blessed him. And to him, Abraham apportioned a 10th part of everything. He is first, by translation of his name, King of Righteousness, and then he is also King of Salem, that is, King of Peace. He is without father or mother or genealogy, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but resembling the Son of God, he continues a priest forever. Oh, I mean, yeah, I'm loving the looks on the face. Like, what? He has no genealogy? Melchizedek has no father or mother? What? He is this almost spiritual being. What New Testament people, what modern day scholars believe is Melchizedek was kind of like a kind of first taste of Jesus. That's the best they can get. Some spiritual being. No beginning or end. Like having neither beginning of days or end of life. Immortal. This is the first priest. Verse 4, see how great this man was to whom Abraham, the patriarch, gave a 10th of all spoils. And those descendants of Levi who receive the priestly office have a commandment in the law to take tithes from the people, that is, from their brothers, though these also are descended from Abraham. Now, it's the Levi that receives the tithe. Now, you've got to understand this. The Levites were never allowed to get land. When the land that was given, the promised land was given to the 12 tribes of Israel, 11 tribes got land. They all got different parts of land. The Levites, they got no land. Because the Levites were the tribe sectioned out for the worship of God, to manage all the worship of God, and the way they lived was by the tithes. They had no land. They had no way to make money. They had no farmland, no sheep, no nothing. They purely lived off the tithes. That's how God created and orchestrated the Israelites. But notice this, verse 6. But this man who does not have his descent from them received tithes from Abraham. So Melchizedek received tithes from Abraham and blessed him who had the promises. It is beyond dispute that the inferior is blessed by the superior, in whom, and listen to this, in the one case, tithes are received by mortal men, but in the other case, by one of whom it is testified that he lives. In one sense, what the writer of Hebrews is explaining, tithes is given to people. You're giving to people. But in another sense, it is far more mysterious than this. It is as mysterious as is Melchizedek. It's a mysterious thing that the Lord has created. Many people think they're giving to the church, but the writer of Hebrews is saying you're not giving to mortal men. When the tribes of Israel were given to the Levites, they weren't giving to the Levites, they were giving to God. It's a bizarre thing that the Lord has created, but by giving to the Levites, they were giving to God. And what the writer of Hebrews is saying is by giving, when you give tithes to the church, you're not giving to the church, you are giving to God. Where did this originate from? It originated from Abraham. And notice this. Verse 6. He received the tithe from Abraham, and what did Melchizedek do to even the likes of Abraham? You have to notice that Abraham had a lot of promises. And yet, Melchizedek was the one that was able to bring blessing. This is powerful. The promises are there, but Melchizedek brings blessing. The priest gives blessing. It's this mysterious thing. We don't give tithes so that we can get stuff in some sense. We give because maybe it's the lowest form of giving. But when we give, there's this wonderful transaction that happens. God is happy to bless. And this is where we'll turn to the classic verse around tithing. Now this will make more sense. Now look at Malachi. You've seen this. Bring the full tithes to the storehouse. This is God talking. Bring the full tithe into the storehouse, that they may be food in my house, and thereby put who to test? Put me to test, says the Lord of hosts, if I will not open the windows of heaven for you and pour down for you a blessing. Notice the same blessing that Melchizedek gave to Abraham. Same blessing. Until there is no more need. In other words, what is tithing? Tithing is not simply giving to the church. Yes, that's part of the transaction. It is this wonderful act of faith. As much as it takes our faith to go, whoa, I'm going to live with a tenth less. As much as that takes act of faith, wow, the money I give hopefully goes to good use and it's used well. As much as it's an act of faith for us, what God is saying, what I want you to see is I want you to see me and test me and see and watch what I do with this. I want you to experience me materially. I want you to experience me tangibly. For us, for all we have is an invisible God. We cannot see Him. But how can we experience an invisible God? We can experience Him through tangible ways, and that's what He promises. When you give tangibly, you can experience Him tangibly. And that's a wonderful thing, isn't it? Because otherwise it's all just feelings. It's just there's no substance to this. But when you can testify God's blessing in your life, when you can testify His goodness in your life, when you can testify that even though you tithe, you're never ever without, and He's pouring out to you more than you have need, man, the invisible God becomes a tangible God. And this is why tithing is so exciting. I'm so excited. When I hear someone wants to tithe, man, that's maturity of relationship with God, because I know what the Bible says about it. It's not us mimicking what Moses says in the law. It's us operating, responding like Abraham, who was Abraham? He was the father of faith. You notice this connection? We don't give tithe because it's just simply the lawful thing to do. We give tithe because it's what the father of faith modeled. It's an act of faith, not just obedience to law. And so you're absolutely right that the law of Moses, it doesn't count. Jesus fulfilled it, and we don't need to do all the things that the law of Moses has prescribed. But you take it a step back, tithing becomes not an act of obedience to law, but it becomes an expression of faith. Because Abraham was the father of faith. That's why it's exciting. It's when your faith becomes alive. It's when the church comes alive. It's when people go, you know what? I don't need to wait for another miracle in order to experience God. My very existence is a miracle because I tithe and offer to the Lord, and yet I have more than I need. Wow, come on. It is tangible. Every day is tangible. Every meal is tangible. Especially if tithing is huge to you, it's like a huge chasm for you. Wow, greater will be your experience of His providence in your life. You have more to gain than to lose. In Jesus' name, amen.